Hi there. Have you ever tried to solve a mystery? Well, this book is called Sherlock, Hemlock, and the Great Twiddlebug Mystery, or The Mystery of the Terrible Mess in My Friend's Front Yard. You see what the detective is holding in his hand? That's a magnifying glass. It makes objects look bigger than they really are. Sometimes detectives use magnifying glasses when they're trying to solve a mystery. Well, let's find out about this mystery. One day, as I walked past my friend's house, I spied a terrible mess in his front yard. "What a terrible mess!" I cried. "What on earth has happened here?" Just then, a man in a checked hat and coat appeared carrying a magnifying glass. "Sherlock Hemlock here, the world's greatest detective," the man announced. "Sherlock Hemlock sees all." "Hello," I said. The man leaped 3 feet into the air. "Zounds!" he cried. "I didn't see you." "I'm glad you're here, Mr. Hemlock," I said. "Maybe you can tell me what on earth has been happening here." "Aha!" said the man. "Has something been happening here?" "Indeed it has," I answered. "There's a terrible mess in my friend's front yard." "A terrible mess," said the man. "That sounds like a job for Sherlock Hemlock." "Look," I pointed. "There are some little horns and paper hats. Perhaps they will help us guess what happened here." Sherlock Hemlock frowned. "Now let me see," he said. "You probably haven't noticed this, but in the front yard there are some horns and paper hats. I've got it! The Twiddlebugs were doing their famous jelly bean dance." "What?" I exclaimed. "Once every 7 years," he said, "the Twiddlebugs appear and play their horns in the hope that it will rain jelly beans. When the jelly beans start raining down, the Twiddlebugs take off their hats and try to catch them." That one Twiddlebug's going to have a problem because he doesn't even have a hat to catch the jelly beans in. Now, it seemed to me that there might be a simpler way to explain what those horns and paper hats were doing there. Do you think Sherlock Hemlock was right? "I think there might be a simpler way to explain what these horns and paper hats are doing there," I said. "That piece of cake in the yard tells me something." What does that look like to you? "Quiet," replied the great detective. "Do you see that piece of cake there? When the Twiddlebugs did their jelly bean dance and no jelly beans fell from the sky, the Twiddlebugs got very hungry. They began to eat that piece of cake." "But how do you explain the candle in the piece of cake?" I asked. "Egad," said Sherlock Hemlock, "there is a candle in that piece of cake. That can mean only one thing. While the Twiddlebugs were doing their dance, along came a big, scary monster who threw candles at them. One of the candles stuck in that piece of cake." I thought about it. Horns and paper hats and a piece of cake with a candle in it. Where had I seen those things together before? It certainly wasn't at a Twiddlebug dance. I was absolutely sure now that I knew what had happened in my friend's front yard. Can you guess what it was? Then Sherlock Hemlock pointed to some crumpled paper on the grass. "Aha!" he cried. "When the Twiddlebugs discovered that a big, scary monster was throwing candles at them, one of them wrote a message on that paper. Something like, 'Dear Sherlock Hemlock, please help. A big, scary monster is throwing candles at us.'" "But Mr. Hemlock," I said, "that's wrapping paper, the kind you wrap birthday presents in." "Don't be silly, young lady," said Sherlock Hemlock. "The big, scary monster grabbed that paper and crumpled it up, and he chased all the Twiddlebugs into that house. That's it. The remarkable brain of Sherlock Hemlock has solved another mystery." "You may be a great detective," I said to Sherlock Hemlock, "but I think you are wrong about why those horns and hats and that piece of cake with the candle in it and the crumpled wrapping paper are in my friend's front yard. I think that what happened here was a birthday party, and I think most people would agree with me." "You believe the great Sherlock Hemlock has made a mistake?" exclaimed Sherlock Hemlock. "Amazing! But look, there's your friend coming out of his house. Why don't you ask him what happened here?" I waved to my friend. "Friend," I shouted, "this gentleman and I have been having a little argument. You can settle it if you can tell us what has been happening in your front yard." "Oh," said my friend, "it's very simple. Today's my birthday, and I had a party here." Sherlock Hemlock shook his head. "Impossible," he cried. "No Twiddlebugs doing the jelly bean dance? No monster throwing candles? Sherlock Hemlock has never been wrong before. Oh, well, there's always a first time." And with a sigh, the great detective moved on down the sidewalk. "Well," I said to my friend, "let's go inside and look at your presents." "I'd love to invite you in," said my friend, "but I can't. You see, we were having the party when all of a sudden all these little bugs came and started doing a dance. And then a monster ran up and threw candles at everyone and chased us into the house. You can't possibly go in there now. So Sherlock Hemlock was right after all, I said. Just then the door to the house flew open, and out ran hundreds of screaming Twiddlebugs, followed by a big, scary monster throwing candles at everyone. Oh, look at him run. Trying to get away from that monster and his candles. Well, look at that, I said, thrilled at the fact that I had been there to listen while Sherlock Hemlock, the world's greatest detective, solved perhaps his greatest case, the mystery of the terrible mess in my friend's yard. The end. Isn't that silly? Were you expecting that ending to the story? I know I certainly wasn't. Okay. Until we have another mystery to solve or another book to read, I'll say bye-bye.